Crowded around TV sets, stunned.
It's unbelievable to me that people can crash planes in the World Trade Center and collapse on thousands of people. All the rescue workers outside there. It's absolutely devastating.
I don't think anybody in this nation is going to be able to sit down at dinner this evening or any evening from now on and consider ourselves to be completely safe.
This is crazy.
The order to close for the first time the entire national air traffic system came early from the Federal Aviation Administration. Many of those airports were evacuated. For how long? Who knows? At least until tomorrow afternoon, perhaps longer. No one's ever done such a thing before, ever.
I think security is going to be so tight tomorrow that you're not going to believe it. It's going to take a long time to get everybody cleared. I mean, they're going to be doing hand searches. They're going to be doing all kinds of stuff. It's going to be the top level of security that we have tomorrow.
Markets, of course, just stopped. How could they operate here? Already, the financial loss has been in the billions. And, said UCLA finance professor Bradford Cornell, it will hurt for some time.
Investors are likely to get frightened. That will lead to a dramatic drop in stock prices.
And now, says Cornell, now that many institutions and companies will try to be more careful about security, we'll keep paying.
That throws sand into the gears on which our economy runs. And it's going to make the cost of doing business greater, corporate profits lower, and that will depress stock prices and economic activity, even in the long run.
But that's for some other day. Today, nationwide, flags were lowered to half-staff. Many states closed their public buildings, courthouses shuttered, trials postponed, popular landmarks locked up. Seattle's Space Needle, the Disney parks on both coasts, even the U.S. Mint shut down. The national pastime went the way of the national mood. Baseball commissioners announced that the schedule is off indefinitely. And for the Emmys, postponed indefinitely. Who felt like celebrating?
This weekend is not the weekend to put on this telecast.
In Texas, thousands of people flocked to a prayer vigil at Southern Methodist University.
Help us to make sense of senseless acts.
Psychiatrist Dr. Stephen Kingsbury said he expects a lot of people will want to be overcautious for a while.
Our sense that we live in a safe society where we have good protections against external threats has been taken from us.
And a terrorism expert, Peter Chalk, who spoke to us over the phone because security kept him out of downtown Washington, told us overreacting towards safety might be a good idea for a while.
That symbolic message that's been transmitted across the world will have profoundly affected the image of the United States abroad, of invulnerability, and that the U.S. can be brought in to the very front line of this sort of attack.
And what wasn't shut down today, we are much more careful about guarding. The border with Mexico and with Canada closed for a while. Security around military installations like this one is at extraordinary levels, of course, also at atomic plants and the other sensitive places in the American infrastructure, which in the past had seemed impervious. No longer. The terrorism expert worries that in their fear and anger, Americans may decide it's time to end this country's famous openness. That would be a mistake, he says.
Without a doubt, I mean, one of the prices you pay for being in a democratic society is that you have to live with a certain risk threshold. The only way you could realistically counter a lot of these dangers is to have a closed society, but that's not what we're about.
America may be a little different after today, a little more conscious of external threat. As the psychiatrist said, we may have some new routines now.
Does that mean that there'll never be another hijacking or terrorist attack? Probably not. Does it mean the vast majority of us will feel safer? Definitely, eventually.
But not today. Today we interviewed the doctor in a park because security at his university office kept our cameras outside.
That's Dateline's Keith Morrison on the mood of this country on this stunning day that so brought together America in grief and shock frustration and anger and determination to go forward as well. We do have some additional information for you. A top New York City police official said at the end of the news conference by Mayor Giuliani that, in fact, there are people still alive trapped in the rubble of the World Trade Center. He wouldn't say how many, but they're bringing in heavy construction equipment to move a lot of the big blocks of concrete that have come down and the steel beams as well. And he says that they have recovered some victims who were still alive when they found them this evening. So that's the most heartening news that we've had from the site of this carnage in lower Manhattan so far tonight. The work will go on through the night and for several more days. John Hanson, the assistant fire chief in Oklahoma City, reminded us earlier that in Oklahoma City the rescue efforts were going on for 7 days before they were called to a halt, and they had a full accounting of all the people who were missing. And as horrendous as Oklahoma City was, it will pale in comparison probably in terms of the number of people who were in the World Trade Center when those two buildings came down, say nothing of that 40-story building that came down later, although that area had been evacuated by that time. NBC's Maria Shriver is in our Burbank bureau tonight, and she has been looking at the people who were on those flights that were destined, most of them for Los Angeles, although one flight was headed for San Francisco. Maria, what can you tell us?
Well, Tom, as you have been reporting, as you just mentioned, all 4 of the hijacked planes were headed here to California, 1 to San Francisco, 3 here to Los Angeles. And the news that came here to California when people heard that those flights were coming here brought this city almost 3,000 miles away from the New York World Trade Center to almost a complete standstill. Los Angeles was one of the first airports in the country to get the early morning call to close down.
Los Angeles International is one of the airports that we've asked to be evacuated early on.
That unprecedented move spread fear throughout the city that terrorism might be heading west. The city went into high alert. Federal buildings, City Hall, and the courts were all evacuated, and that was just the beginning. The chief of police attended an emergency council meeting and went on television to try and calm people's fears.
We certainly want to again reassure the public that all is safe in the city of LA. We certainly have no guarantees, but we're certainly looking at all of the precautionary measures to ensure that the community is as safe as possible.
And while there were no terrorist incidents, nonetheless, businesses came to a standstill. Disneyland closed its doors not just in California, but throughout the world. Virtually all studios closed down, including Jay Leno, who suspended production for the rest of the week. Tonight's Latin Grammys were also canceled, so was Madonna's concert and sporting events for the near future. Even the Emmys canceled Sunday's award ceremony.
A celebration and a comedy show would just not be something that would be appropriate for this country this weekend.
By mid-afternoon, the state's governor felt it necessary to go on television and reassure all Californians that their state was indeed secure.
First of all emergency services operations are up and running throughout California. Secondly, all law enforcement and firefighting personnel at the state level are fully deployed.
But despite the pronouncements from elected officials, this was a state in fear and shock.
It's like a movie. I can't believe that it could happen in this country.
And while thousands of Los Angelinos were stranded and frightened, the real concern here was for New Yorkers and for the families here in Los Angeles who had loved ones on those planes. American and United Airlines asked the Salvation Army and the Red Cross to be available today to offer pastoral and ministerial services to the families of victims.
It's just to be there and to say to them, we are here and we'll do whatever we can do to help you through this trauma and this pain.
Tom, it's important to note that neither American Airlines or United Airlines have officially released the names of the passengers on those 4 flights. But however, some family members have released some names, most notably David Angel and his wife Lynn. were on the flight from Boston here to Los Angeles. Angel is well known as the producer, one of the producers of the hit television show Frasier. His colleagues released a statement this afternoon calling him an incredibly talented, kind, and gentle man, a man of incredible personal faith as well. He perished on that flight. Also, as we've been reporting, I know you have also Barbara Olson. She was the wife of Solicitor General Ted Olson. She was on the flight from Washington to Los Angeles. She was one of the few passengers on several of these flights who managed to make a cell phone call to her husband where she told him that they were being hijacked. Moments later, her plane crashed into the Pentagon. Several other names have trickled out, but we don't know whether their kin have been notified, so we don't want to go out and actually tell you who they are. American Airlines and United have both asked us to publicize 800 numbers that they have put together. This is for family and friends who have questions, who want information about whether loved ones actually did get on those flights. The United hotline is 1-800-932-6555, and the American Airlines hotline is 1-800-245-0999. And they're quick to point out that people who are just who have no real personal connection should not tie up these lines. These are phone numbers for families, for concerned members of families who might have loved ones on those flights. But people here, if you flew over this city today, you wouldn't even recognize it because these normally clogged freeways were virtually empty. Many people kept their children at home from school, although the school system did go on as usual, and people have been asking the city to return to normal. But very much, this was a city very much in shock this morning. Throughout the day, people thought this terrorism might be headed this way. So we'll continue to keep you up to date on the California situation. Tom?
Thanks very much, NBC's Maria Shriver. I suspect that was the case across the country as well, even for cities and small towns that were not the destination of these airplanes, that things did come to a stop today because it was one of those events in which America coalesces around its sense of national identity and shares the television set as well, trying to keep abreast of what has been going on. We're joined now by New York Governor Pataki, who has been down at the scene of this carnage all day long. Governor, tonight we heard a top New York City police official say that there are still people alive, that they do expect to recover some people from that wreckage throughout the night tonight. Is that your understanding as well?
Well, we certainly hope so. The rescue efforts are ongoing, and they have the highest priority. We have the city of New York has the finest police and fire rescue teams in the world. They've been augmented by our state, National Guard, and federal help, and everything that can be done is being done, and we're just praying that we can recover some people who might be in the rubble right now.
The New York City Firemen's Union reported earlier that it had lost 200 of its members when the buildings came down. Is there any confirmation of that you have independently?
We don't have any confirmation of particular numbers, but we know this is one of the darkest days in American history, and our prayers are with those who have lost their lives, with the brave families of the firefighters and the police who risked their lives to save others and were victimized by this terrorist attack. And our prayers are with those who are afraid their parents might not come home tonight. But we're going to continue to have hope. We're going to continue to work to get through this and to make sure that everything is done to try to recover anyone who might still be alive downtown.
That is the highest priority, obviously, and to treat those who have been injured and to recover those who have been killed. Do you have any sense at all as to when that financial district can return to some semblance of normality?
Tom, as you know, we've closed New York City south of 14th Street for tomorrow. The point right now is to make sure the entire focus is on the rescue and the search efforts, and that the emergency crews can get in and out as easily and as readily as possible. And we'll make a determination tomorrow, probably at the end of the day, what additional parts of the city may be open tomorrow afternoon. But right now, the entire focus has to be on the rescue and search efforts.
You used to have an office in the World Trade Center, didn't you?
Yes. I had my office in the World Trade Center, and the state today has had many, many offices and many employees in the World Trade Center, and I had friends there this morning.
And do you know what happened?
We don't know. We don't know. We're praying, and we're doing everything we can to try to rescue them.
Is there anything that the citizens of New York or surrounding areas should know in terms of what the city or what the state needs that they can do?
Tom, the citizens have been great. I was down at Cabrini Hospital a couple of hours ago, and we had lines around the blocks of people in line to donate blood. They're not letting tourists drive them from the streets, and in fact, they're coming together. We are going to, as this process moves forward, need EMTs, nurses, additional support as the frontline forces downtown now go through this and need relief. And we set up state hotlines for nurses, doctors, EMTs, and others. And we're also organizing additional fire and police support so that we can rotate services in and out. But the spirit has been enormous. This is a very dark day, but out of this death and destruction, you can see hope. And we're not going to let these terrorist barbarians take away our freedom and take away our hope.
Finally, tough question, Governor Pataki, but what are your officials telling you about the population in those buildings when they came down?
We just don't know. We know that a number of people did get out and were evacuated before the buildings came down. At this point, we just don't know how many were not able to get out.
There is an unconfirmed report tonight from a New York radio station, Governor, that 2 men with a truckload of explosives were arrested at or near the George Washington Bridge. Do you know anything about that?
We've had all sorts of reports and rumors, and we've been in constant touch with federal officials, with the FBI and the national security officials, and we have no confirmed report of any such activity at this point. I also spoke with the President and the Vice President earlier today, and they have no information that additional terrorist threats have been targeted at New York or anywhere else at this point. Obviously, no one knew or anticipated the attacks this morning, so we can never be 100% sure. But at this point, I'm unaware of any direct security threats that the federal government is aware of.
Governor George Pataki, the governor of the state of New York, it's been a long and difficult day for you. It will not end at midnight tonight, obviously. We wish you the very best.
Thank you very much, Tom.
All right, Governor Pataki of New York. Barbara Olson, we have a picture of her, I think. She is the well-known CNN conservative commentator. Her husband is Theodore Olson, who is the Solicitor General of the United States, successfully argued on behalf of President George W. Bush before the U.S. Supreme Court in that contested presidential election growing out of Florida. This is a personal loss for the administration as well, because Barbara and Ted Olson were 2 of the most popular figures, especially in Republican social circles in Washington. They loved to entertain. They loved the opera. They were 2 people who were well known for their keen wit and their very keen intelligence. And she did get off a phone call to her husband on the cell phone before her plane crashed into the Pentagon today. So there is a personal loss at the White House tonight as well with the death of Barbara Olson. We're going to go now to Ashley Banfield, who is in downtown New York, not too far from the World Trade Center, where she has been throughout the day and had a very perilous experience herself. At one point, Ashley had to break some windows to get in the building to get away from the dust and smoke cloud.
Tom, when the second tower came down, unfortunately, my producer and I found ourselves in a far too close a situation, and we were finding ourselves running from the cloud that consumed us, and we had to break into a nearby building just to breathe, and we were followed by a New York police officer and also a security guard from the World Trade Center. We couldn't recognize either of them because we were all covered in so much white dust at the time. It was barely recognizable except for his badge. I just want to get you up to speed on what's happening now. We've been watching a number of different emergency vehicles filing into this area, but we're also watching as a number of semi-trucks roll in as well. We've been told that about 24 semi-trucks as well as 60 different dump trucks have been lined up and ready to go in to move away some of the large debris. As you're about to hear in a moment, there's a reason why they're having to remove that large debris before they can actually continue this search, because most of the searching on the surface of these 2 stumps of what were the World Trade Center towers didn't really provide much to anybody. There wasn't much to be found at all, certainly no one alive. And what's strange is very few cadavers as well. I'm joined by one of the firefighters who was one of the first on the scene. Lieutenant Pat Clancy has just come out from 12 hours in sort of the ground zero area, and I just want you to describe for me what happened when you first arrived, Pat, on the scene and you ended up going up onto the rubble heaps.
Myself and the firefighters from my company were ordered to go to, we were at a command post, we were ordered to go to where one of the towers was, I believe it was the Tower 1. There was nothing really there but maybe 5 or 6 stories of debris, and we slowly climbed over as much as we could and started searching for people that might have been on surface, and trying to crawl into some of the crevices and crawling out, hitting tools, looking for possible firefighters or civilians.
You knew at the time there would be firefighter casualties. Did you have any idea that the number as it stands is about 200 of your colleagues?
We were assuming it would be a large amount, but firefighters, civilians, police officers, emergency workers, they're even a block away. There are fire trucks and police cruisers that are ambulances that are flipped over, burned out a block away.
Just quickly, you were able to call your wife via our cell phones when you got out of your 12-hour shift. She had no idea you were alive. What was her response to you?
She was hysterical, but I would imagine hundreds of firefighters are the same way, their wives.
Lieutenant Pat Clancy, thank you for talking to us, and good luck. Stay safe. I know you're going back in tomorrow, so be careful. Thank you. Tom, that's been the story from a number of the firefighters and emergency workers who've emerged from this, many of them covered in the white dust that you've seen probably throughout all of the pictures today. It's been just a tragic story all around, many of them knowing full well that they've lost a lot of friends, colleagues, and loved ones in that rubble as well.
Actually, because you have been isolated down there in a way you may not have heard, a top New York City official is now saying tonight that, in fact, there are some people who are alive in the rubble, and they do hope to get them out before the end of the night. He also said that they had recovered some people who were still alive when they got them out of the rubble, so there is some faint hope, at least, for people who have been trapped in there. We don't know the number by any means or how severely they are trapped at this time, but thank you very much. It's been a long and difficult and dangerous day for you, and we do appreciate your reporting. Let's go to NBC's Robert Hager now, who has some additional information for us on that United Airlines flight that left Newark bound for San Francisco and then was headed back toward the East Coast when it went down outside of Pittsburgh. Robert?
A couple of pieces of key information. It comes from a briefing that Attorney General John Ashcroft has just completed for members of Congress at the Capitol Police Headquarters down near the Capitol. First, before that Pennsylvania plane, he did tell the members of Congress that knives were the weapons used in these attacks. We had some inklings of that before from cell phone calls made from the planes, but as far as federal authorities know, knives were the weapons used. There are no reports yet of guns having been used in any of these 4 planes that were hijacked. Now, the point about that the 4th of the crashes, it was a United airliner that had taken off from Newark, and on the etching you can see it got out near Cleveland, and suddenly it diverts back east. There had been some speculation that it might have been headed for Camp David, but Attorney General Ashcroft in his briefing for members of Congress said it was turning back for Washington, D.C. He did not say any particular target. In fact, I guess there'd be no way for him to know what target they had in mind, but he did believe that they had Washington in mind as a destination, and there's some indication they might have actually filed some kind of flight plan from the air saying that. He also said one other thing, that plane was not shot down. Now, there had been no evidence that it was, but there were rumors around earlier in the day. Many people wondered, gee, could they have heard that it was going for the White House or something? Could anyone have actually dared to have ordered it to be shot down, even with all those people on it, because of national security? But Attorney General Ashcroft put an end to that. He said the plane was not shot down from the air, not shot down by any missile. Tom?
All right, thanks very much, NBC's Robert Hager. Any additional word, by the way, Bob, on when flights may be resumed?
No, they're still saying noon tomorrow Eastern time is when they're going to consider it, but it's not certain that that's when it will come. At any rate, it's clear that there'll be a lot more security checks, that there's going to be, for openers, no more curbside baggage, and there are going to be scattered checks for identification and personal checks of handbags, that kind of thing. It's going to be time-consuming.
All right, thank you very much. We've just heard a stunning number from the Pentagon. We've been trying all night long to get some fix on the number of casualties there. NBC Jim Miklashevsky stands by now. Jim?
Tom, the latest figures from Arlington firefighters, who are really in charge of the firefighting and rescue efforts here, an estimated 800. killed inside the Pentagon, many of them still buried in the rubble that you see behind us. They brought in heavy earth movers, cadaver dogs, in an effort to find those who are still buried in the rubble. Very little hope, really, of finding anyone still alive, given the intensity of the fire inside and the severity of the damage to the building, the total collapse of all 5 floors down onto the ground floor. So, again, the latest estimate, 800 dead in the Pentagon. Tom.
We should assume that the majority of those are military personnel, or would it be a mix as well of civilian employees and military personnel?
Given the portion of the building, Tom, it's probably primarily military, Navy, Marines, some Army, and of course some civilians mixed in.
All right, thanks very much, NBC's Jim Miklashevsky. The very disquieting news that at least 800 people were killed at the Pentagon, more than 266 were killed on those airplanes, an untold number still unaccounted for in Lower Manhattan. This has been, as we have been saying all day long, a day quite unlike any other in American history. There's never been an attack of this severity or this magnitude within the continental United States. People are comparing it to Pearl Harbor, but at that time we did know who the enemy was. It did get the United States involved in World War II. This, of course, a shadowy terrorist attack using civilians against civilians, hijacked airliners as guided missiles. We want to share with you now just some of the first-person accounts of the people who have gone through this long, unending, and difficult day.
On any given day, New York is a city with its own sounds, with its own rhythm. Today, you could feel a collective shudder as it all came crashing down. And the voices of those at Ground Zero are still shaking. Fathers.
All of a sudden, we felt the second one go.
Mothers.
We all heard this just really loud explosion.
Daughters.
A huge explosion and a shudder.
And our own colleagues at NBC.
I never thought that it would happen here.
Tom Lochtefeld, at work at a trading firm on the 80th floor of World Trade Tower 2 when the first plane hit.
All you could see were papers and smoke just flying through and around the plaza. And we looked up about maybe 10 or 15 floors up, and the whole wall was blown out, and it was filled with flames. And everybody was just like in awe. We had no idea what it could be. And suddenly our 2 managers in the office, they came screaming in with an urgency that I've never ever heard before in anybody's voice, saying, "Get out, get out, get out, get out." We had gotten down to about the 50th floor from the 80th floor, and there was a PA announcement, and they kept saying, there's a fire in World Trade number 1. The firemen are attending to it. World Trade Center is secure. You may return to your offices. Repeatedly, repeatedly. And everybody just stood in sort of disbelief.
Tom didn't go back. It was far from secure. Just minutes later, the second crash right into his office.
If I went back up, I would have been dead. And if I didn't leave the minute that I left, I would be dead. And God bless the people who were on the 110th floor, because if I was down at the 50th, they were down at the 80th.
It took 15 minutes to get out, but once there...
People had left their shoes to get away. I mean, there were piles of blood in the street of people who had gotten hit by shrapnel from the buildings.
Your wife, you know, she said to me that she thought she was a widow.
I bet.
Kim White was stuck on the 74th floor of Tower 1.
The doors were locked.
Why?
I have no clue. We sat around for about 5, almost 10 minutes trying to find a door or get somebody with a key to come open the doors so we can get downstairs. If we had those precious 5 or 10 minutes, would have made that much of a difference.
A difference because she barely managed to escape as the building was collapsing.
Glass just flying all over the place, and we're not knowing which way to go because we didn't know which way the building fell. Once it hit ground, all you saw was blackness. I'm sitting here saying to myself, breathe properly, Kim, breathe properly, because you don't want to take in too much, because you're going to collapse, and no one's going to be able to find you because there's nothing but blackness.
And breathing wasn't easy, not just because of the debris, To make things worse, Kim suffers from asthma and suffered an attack.
Was there a time today when you thought you were going to die?
Oh, definitely. On at least 3 or 4 occasions. The initial explosion, going out to the reception area, seeing that ceiling collapsed, being stuck in a stairwell and not being able to get in. We couldn't go back up, we couldn't go down. My life didn't flash before my eyes. I was just trying to get down far enough where, I would be safe.
And to the safest place and person.
I just want to see my mother, that's all. I'm probably 32 years old, sleep with my mom tonight.
Someone else's mother, Maggie Cusack, was also battling her way down from the 82nd floor of Tower 1.
The building just shook, and you could see the stuff kind of flying down. It was big. I mean, you could tell it was a large event. I believe all of my coworkers got at least out into the stairwells. I guess it was about the 27th floor. The firemen started coming up into the building. And I just felt that they were very brave, and we were kind of clapping for them and wishing them luck on their way in.
Are you thinking of the firemen because you fear that they were perhaps trapped in the building when it collapsed?
I think they probably were. I think there were a lot of them that did get trapped in there, and I think that's very sad. They were all nice, young, healthy, good-looking guys, and I'm just really grateful that I got out before the buildings collapsed.
A few moments ago,
NBC's Dawn Fratangelo with some of the people who went through the most terrifying day of their lives, their relief that they survived, their gratitude for the people who tried to save them, and their grief as well for their loss. Let's go to NBC's Rahema Ellis now. There is some, I'm told, exceptional videotape at Ground Zero. Rahema?
Tom, indeed, I have just come back from Ground Zero. It's like going inside a disaster. We have some pictures we want you to take a look at. There is an eerie light that's cast over the entire area. Fire crews are hosing down the smoldering remains. There are firefighters everywhere. They are literally sifting through the rubble, trying to see what there is, who they might be able to find. I asked one firefighter, it is hard to imagine that anyone could survive this kind of devastation. But one firefighter said to me, we never give up. We will continue to search through this area until the very last word is given that we shouldn't search anymore. They are hoping against all hope that they can find someone out of this rubble. Tom, it is almost unbelievable. It takes your breath away to stand in what was the center of America's financial area, and now it doesn't exist anymore. There is still dust, choking dust. The air is so thick, it's very hard to breathe. It's very difficult to see. The firefighters, however, as I say, they refuse to give up. We went 1 block away from Ground Zero. It is the staging area where all the firefighters are. We talked with one of the chiefs who told us that he felt that they were able to bring someone out alive. He couldn't tell me what the condition of the person was at this moment, but he said that's what his firefighters are there to do, to see if anybody has been able to survive this tragedy. Tom?
Rahema, did you see any evidence of people who were alive or hear from the firefighters around the ground about recovering some people who were alive?
No, Tom, I did not. Every firefighter I talked to only shook his head, lowered his head in disbelief and sadness, but again, with the determination that they were going to continue to search until all hope was lost of finding anybody alive. They are continuing that search.
Thank you very much. NBC's Rahema Ellis, the New York City police official who said earlier that he believed that people were still alive there. The hope may have been the father of the wish in that case. This day, you'll remember forever, whatever your age, wherever you live in this country. There are those days that, for the people who are alive in America, are etched forever in their minds. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. 1945, the end of World War II, victory over Germany and Japan, the death of FDR. November 22nd, 1963, the assassination of John F. Kennedy. The age of innocence came to an end in America. 1968, the assassination of his brother and Martin Luther King. 1974, the resignation of Richard Nixon. 1989, the death of communism, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the liberation of Poland and Czechoslovakia. 1990, the release of Nelson Mandela. And, of course, 1989 as well, Tiananmen Square and all that that meant to this country. 1968 also saw the landing of the man on the moon. And then the millennium, a new century, a new beginning of 1,000 years, new hope for this world and for America. 1 year in, on the 11th of September, the 9th month, 9/11/01, an act of terrorism that is tantamount to war, the most serious attack on this country since Pearl Harbor, the most devastating attack within the continental United States ever by a foreign force of some kind in more than 100 years. We'll all be tested by all of this, and we'll have continuing coverage. Many of your local stations will go to their local news now, but we'll have continuing coverage on this NBC station. Brian Williams will be here for a while, and I'll see you again at 11:30.
You're watching NBC4, working for you. Live from the area's leading news station, this is News 4 at 11.
These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation.
President Bush tonight condemning today's acts of terror and vowing to bring those responsible to justice. The searing images from today's incredible attacks remain with us tonight. 2 hijacked planes crash into the World Trade Center towers in New York. A little while later, the buildings crumble with thousands believed trapped inside. A 3rd hijacked plane smashes into the Pentagon, possibly leaving dozens dead and injured inside, possibly hundreds. A 4th plane also crashes, this one near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The deadly chain of events tonight has left Americans feeling frightened and vulnerable as we try to cope with what was once unimaginable. Good evening, I'm Doreen Gensler.
And I'm Jim Vance. A number of school systems in the area will be closed tomorrow because of the terrorist attacks today. You'll be able to see that information at the bottom of your screen. We begin tonight with new developments regarding the crash at the Pentagon. That plane took off from Dulles Airport. Officials say as many as 800 people may have been killed when the plane crashed into the Pentagon. Also, the Washington Post is reporting on its website that the plane was heading toward the White House when it made a tight turn, circled around, and then slammed into the Pentagon. Julie Carey is at the Pentagon now with the latest on the situation there. Julie?
Jim, the building that is the very symbol of our nation's security is still burning tonight, more than 13 hours after it was the target of a terrorist attack. There is an untold number of victims inside, and tonight one fire official estimates that as many as 800 could be dead here. And with the fire still burning, hope is dimming that there will be any survivors to rescue. The first close-up view of the horrific aftermath, a yawning hole left in the southwest side of the Pentagon. Wreckage of the hijacked American Airlines 757 visible in the rubble where the building collapsed. Tonight, reporters were escorted into the Pentagon through the smoky hallways for a briefing by Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. It was an effort to show that despite the deadly attack, the government is still operating.
The Pentagon's functioning. It'll be in business tomorrow.
Top military officials used harsh terms to condemn the terrorist assault.
We have watched the tragedy of an outrageous act of barbaric terrorism carried out by fanatics against both civilians and military people. Acts that have killed and maimed many innocent and decent citizens of our country.
The scene outside the Pentagon was surreal all day long and into the evening as flames once again shot into the sky. It was around 9:40 this morning when the hijacked jet carrying 58 passengers and 6 crew members plowed into the building full throttle, penetrating through 3 of the 5 rings of hallways that make up the Pentagon's unique design. Witnesses describe an orange fireball, a concussion, then thick black smoke.
I looked over to the side and I saw this jet coming in, and it was really low, and it was an American Airlines jet. You could read the AA on the side, silver fuselage, and it kind of disappeared over this embankment here for a moment, and then huge explosion, flames flying into the air, and just chaos on the road.
The portion of the building that was hit had recently been renovated and some areas were unoccupied. This construction worker was inside laying tile.
I'm up in the 6th corridor, and next thing you know,
all of a sudden this whole explosion looked like you know, like one of them movies, like the airplane type. And all my cot started to rock, and I had to put my feet out to hold it. Then I see 2 trash cans coming out of the corridor, just flying past me, then smokes.
Still, witnesses say the evacuation of nearly 23,000 employees was quiet and orderly. Once outside, though, many broke down into tears, and those with injuries were helped to stretchers. Tonight, Virginia Senator John Warner summed up the impact of the attack.
This is indeed the most tragic hour in America's history.
Pentagon officials refuse to estimate how many have perished inside. They say all on the plane were certainly killed, along with many others.
The numbers will be calculated, and it will not be a few.
Now, tonight's briefing inside the Pentagon offered few specifics about what added measures are being taken to safeguard the Pentagon or to retaliate. But in his concluding statement tonight, General Shelton said, "Make no mistake about it, your armed forces are ready." Reporting live from the Pentagon, I'm Julie Carey. Back to you.
Thank you, Julie. The Pentagon is asking members of the military to call into their respective branches to let them know they're okay. There are several numbers the Pentagon has asked us to pass along. Those numbers are for military personnel and for family members concerned about a relative's status. There are 2 numbers for Army personnel. They are 1-800-984-8523. Also 703-428-0002. There is 1 number for the Navy and the Marines. That number, 1-877-663-6772. Members of the Air Force are asked to call 1-800-253-9276. Again, those numbers are for military personnel and their families.
Local search and rescue teams that have traveled the world to offer assistance during crises are at the Pentagon tonight. Brian Moore is at the Pentagon with that side of this story. Brian?
Doreen, the rescue teams in Fairfax and Montgomery counties have been all over the world, and their mission tonight is to try to find survivors. But this likely, officials say, will become a body recovery mission. They've been everywhere. They're experts, they're professionals, but this task is unlike any other because it's so close to home.